I've done
It's
right.
just doing it the same thing over and over again.
Right. That's right.
So
And
it's
then,
like doing
yeah,
sales or anything else really that is semi-repetitive. You
right.
just keep doing it and you build the tolerance mentally, physically, and emotionally to keep it up. And
That's
that's how
right.
you produce millions of dollars a year in sales, or you grow your company, or you write multiple books, or what have you. It's the same mindset
Right.
and the same development plan to eventually do something truly audacious.
Right.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. Audley Stevenson here for another edition of hands down the most audacious podcast the internet has to offer. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I appreciate you for being here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the handle The Audacious Pod. And then if you head over to our YouTube channel and you can hit the bell down below, there we go. You can say subscribe. You can stay connected to all good things Audacious related. And you can, again, connect with us on YouTube. And every time we got new content, you'll be the first to know. Now, we'll be talking about living a life of excellence on this edition of the podcast, or more specifically, the things that we can do in our lives every day when it comes to chasing that excellent life. When we talk about excellence, it's also important to understand that the definition of what it is very different between individuals. And that's because we don't necessarily all define it the same way, nor do we necessarily value the same things. So it will be very personal. We each have our own dreams and goals and wishes and where we're trying to get to and what we're trying to achieve. So again, those things will also be different between people. I've got Joe Templin joining me on the podcast, and we'll further dive into the conversation of living an excellent life with him. You know, he's the author of the book Everyday Excellence and has spent a lot of time studying and understanding and dissecting the topic of excellence. So it's really, really great to have him on the program. It's a fascinating chat, and I think listeners will truly appreciate some of the things we talk about. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Joe Templin. Enjoy.
Live and we're good to go.
We're fantastic. Listen, Joe, so first and foremost, I appreciate you being here and hanging out with me here on the Audacious Living Podcast. This podcast, we very much are centered around, again, I was taught not to define a word by saying the word. So I was going to say is by being audacious, but I'm going to say that because I think audacious is a big part of what we do here, and the boldness and the whole idea of stepping outside of that box that's comforting for a lot of people. The idea.
I'm a huge fan of BHAGs, so
yeah, there we go.
I'm totally into this.
Yeah, no, well, and I think it makes sense. What I found is that more than anything, it's become a way of living your life, right? And when you adopt those principles and how you live your life, is not only good for yourself but those around you. If imagine you're doing something real like ultra marathon running as an example. I'm sure the people you've talked to have been in awe, and you might even inspired one or two people along the way too, right? So. That for me is where it's all
I mentioned it to somebody, they're like, "You're crazy," and I'm like, "Yeah." And
so, what got you to it then?
Actually, I hate running, which it makes it even more interesting. And I never should have listened to David Goggins talking about his first ultra right before I ran my first one.
Right,
but he actually said that he hated running too, so I don't feel quite so bad because he's a real runner.
Oh yeah.
But I did my first ultra because I did my first marathon just before my 30th birthday, because I swore if I didn't do it by then, I would never do one.
Okay.
Then I did another marathon. And I'm like, this sucks. I'm never doing it again. I swore at that point I would never do another marathon in my life. And technically, I have kept that promise. So I got into what are called Ragnars, which are 200-ish mile team relay races.
Okay.
And you get chunks of, these medals. In fact, the best one that I ever did was the Toronto one in 2016.
Okay.
We started in Coburg and ran all the way in Niagara Falls. That was pretty awesome. But when COVID hit and they canceled all the Ragnars, my running team was like, what do we do? I mean, we're used to running. We get together. This is how we blow off steam. As one of my friends said, let's do something crazy so we don't do something stupid. So we decided to have a whole series of events like a virtual Ragnar and a moonlit 5K. And we're like, hey, let's do a backyard ultra because. So it was supposed to be that every hour you would run anywhere between 1 and 3 miles, whatever you committed to. Okay. But, I screwed it up in that I thought it started at 5 in the morning, not at 10 in the morning. So I had 5 extra hours of doing 3 miles an hour. So that was 15 extra miles. And I get out to doing 40 miles and everybody else has dropped off. And they're like, come on, Joe, you can do it. You can keep going. I'm like, you know what? Might as well. And I'm like, all right, I swore I'd never do a marathon. How about I just do a double one? Because 2 negatives make a positive from a mathematical point of view. And in my twisted brain, that made sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So I ended up doing 52.5 miles that day. Was not prepared for it. Ended up, that was by far the furthest I'd ever gone in a single day by over 10 miles. Wow. Actually more like 15 miles. So like I'm getting down to the last 10 miles and I'm spent physically, emotionally.
Sure.
One of my friends actually reached out to me, one of my Canadian friends, and she needed help and she needed my emotional support. So the reserves that I was going to use to get through that last 10 miles, I had spent it on somebody else, right, which made it that much more difficult, but that much more revealing as to what I could actually do. So after I started recovering from that and everything, I'm like, you know what? I could go further. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this for real. And I'm going to do 100 kilometers. So first weekend in October, I did 100 kilometers on my own.
Wow.
I was training for 125 to do this April, but then I broke my leg in January. Ouch. And I'm not allowed to run more than 2 miles at a time right now. So
gotcha.
As soon as I'm allowed to run, I'll start training again hard.
Wow. Look, a couple of things in that. First off, I've said this many times on this podcast, how I'm such a big fan of milestones and markers, right? So, if I've run 2 kilometers, why can't I run 4? If I run 4, why can't I run 10? If I've done
it's just doing it the same thing over and over again.
Right. That's right.
So it's like doing sales or anything else really that is semi-repetitive.
Right.
You just keep doing it and you build the tolerance mentally, physically, and emotionally to keep it up. And that's how you produce millions of dollars a year in sales, or you grow your company, or you write multiple books, or what have you. It's the same mindset,
right,
and the same development plan to eventually do something truly audacious.
Right. And that's exactly what it is in terms of when we talk about, how people reach levels of greatness. It's not necessarily get up and one day you're there. There's a lot of steps along the way that we may not necessarily see because, we like to spotlight in the end goal. We go, look what they've done. But there's a whole bunch that's happened before they've gotten there.
Yeah, as Muhammad Ali said, champions are made not in the ring, but in the dark on the roads. And it's that willingness to grind it out, to do the little things, to suffer the small pains for the great glory. I mean, I don't care if it's writing a book or getting a PhD, you got to get up and do the work on a regular basis.
That's right.
I mean, I grew up on a farm, so hard work is in my nature because you know what? The cows needed to be milked and the animals need to be fed no matter what. Didn't matter how you were feeling. It had to be done. If you don't work, you don't eat. And I like to eat.
That's exactly it. And I also like the idea of even past accomplishments. So even if you come up against something and you don't feel like but last week you did this in no sweat. What's your excuse for tomorrow? Like there isn't one, right? Outside of your mind just telling you can't do it or you don't feel like doing it. There's no reason why.
And that's where discipline and building structures around you that support it help overcome it. So I've got a special needs kid, and so he needs a lot of structure around him to be able to achieve his goals in school and in other areas. And as human beings, we can't flap our arms and fly. I mean, I've tried it, doesn't work very well. So we build airplanes. Why are people so concerned about building other structures around them, whether it's the people, whether it is psychological structures, whether it's habits, to enable them to achieve great things?
Yes, that's a great question. As a father myself, as a child on the autism spectrum, I can totally relate to what you said. And even when you talk about structures and the need to have things in place to help build for success, I've learned some tremendous lessons. Even for my daughter, I'll give you a quick story. When at the time when she was born, she had a delay in speech. Her speech was severely delayed, and you would know this. The spectrum is quite broad, and not everyone is placed at the same thing at the same spot, and there's different there it's all different, right? But they all fit on this broad spectrum. So in the case of my daughter, who was her speech was delayed, she's healthy, her gross motor skills are off the charts, she was healthy, she was happy, always laughing, but again her speech was delayed. And I could remember going through different points where I'm like, oh man, and what's gonna happen, and your mind starts talking to you like, am I gonna hear her say daddy anymore or at all? And so you're going through all these sort of self-talk things. I'll never forget this, Joe. We're driving down it was a semi-residential street, and it had businesses on either side. And as I'm driving down, she's in the back seat, her and I in the car by ourselves, and I can hear all these random words being spit out. And I'm going, oh my gosh, and I'm hearing open, butcher, store, not realizing that she was reading the signs as we were driving by. And here I am worried about if she'd ever speak again. And here she is talking, not reading. And so it just really shows you the lesson I took from that was the whole idea of the potential that we have inside of us. It's there, it's ready to come out, but we're all on our own different time clock and schedule. And as much as I might want it for you and you may want it for me, if I'm not ready, if you're not ready, it's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean it's not there. So
exactly. And as my kid says, he's a mutant and he's got his own superpowers. So he's got an incredible ability with mathematics. He remembers numbers, and like many autistic kids, he hyper focuses on certain things because he's also ADHD. So, this kid could tell you about how many bolts were in the Titanic and how many pennies were collected by the schools in the penny harvests last year, just weird things like that. But that's just the way he is. And we all have our own form of weirdness, but we also have our own potential for greatness in something that excites us.
Right. And that's where, Joe, our focus really should be on. It's really easy to talk about what you don't have. That's easy. But what do you have? And what are your strengths? And what are our superpowers, if you will? Because I believe if we focus more on those things, we'll accomplish anything we want because we'll work to our strengths.
Unless you're a professional athlete and there's some holes in your game, nobody cares about that sort of stuff. They care about how incredibly spectacular you can be in certain areas. I remember a story years ago. John Frusciante was the guitar player for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he's just like off the chart genius, like Eddie Van Halen, like some of these other guys.
Sure.
And he was not allowed to have a credit card because he didn't understand the concept of money. Okay. So yeah, it's an interesting little foible, but he doesn't need to dedicate brain power to that because he is truly maximizing his ability in these other spaces. And so Bruce Lee said, I don't fear the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks one time. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. So if you can find certain things in your capability that the society wants to reward, and you can become just absolutely spectacular at them, you're going to, by definition, have a spectacular life. Now, there's some things around that you need to make sure you take care of, because you have to pay your taxes, and you have to even shower occasionally, so you can't turn into like a total Howard Hughes.
Right.
But if you can have some baseline acceptability in these other areas, and they're not going to be faults that are so dramatic that they tear down what you're building, take and double and triple down on what you're good at, that what you're passionate about, that where you can do things that nobody else can do. And that's how you're going to make a name for yourself that lasts generations.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Joe, you've made it your mission to focus on daily excellence. I wonder if you sort of talk about how you landed on that. Like, what made that? How did you make that your mantra, so to speak?
Well, when I was after I wrote the book, one of my friends asked me how long it took me to write it. I'm like 30 plus years, because it is accumulation of all these things that I've learned. And one example that I give of is that everybody plays video games, and so everyone's trying to get the castle and save the princess and get all the gold and all that. But you have to go through certain things before you can beat those ultimate bosses, and you get more capability as you're doing it. You get more experience, and you go through basically these side quests. And these side quests, you're getting some form of resources, where it's healing up so that you can do the next fight, or you're getting something from the weird old guy in the tavern, or you're learning new skills. And if we look at our life that way, every day is an opportunity to go on part of these quests. And that detour that you go on might seem irrelevant, but as Steve Jobs said, it's only at the end of the story that you can look back and connect the dots. And Steve Jobs is a classic example of this. He dropped out of college and was taking a calligraphy class there because it was interesting. And that led to all the cool fonts that we have with computers today. So it's looking for what you can draw from these things and continuously growing and improving. So in my work as a business coach working with financial advisors, I'd always tell them, no goose eggs. You have to accomplish something that day. You have to get better in some capacity. So, everyday excellence was born from this, because you become great by continuously growing, by having this compounding. Kaizen in a lot of ways of continuous improvement among lots of different things. And if we look at our life as a whole, we have all these different dimensions. We have our physical health, we have our mental health, we have our nutrition, we have our education, we have our work, we have our relationships. So not every day is a good day in all capacities.
Sure.
But if you can make sure that you get some wins every single day, if you can improve in some capacity, and part of that comes about from programming your mind, but also taking care of those other components. And never let a day go by without telling somebody that you love them. Never let a day go by without taking time to learn something new. Never to let a day go by without taking some time to appreciate the fact that 400 trillion to 1 odds led you to be on this earth. So never waste that day. So if you can continuously improve in some capacity, you're going to develop excellence, especially if your mindset gets there first, so that you force yourself, even on a not good day, to at least make it better in some capacity.
Gotcha.
There's an example. My old cello teacher told me years and years ago, this is going back decades, I asked him why he practiced every day, and he was in his 80s at this point. He's like, I learned this when I was performing, that if I don't practice for 1 day, I notice. If I don't practice for 2 days, the critics notice. If I don't practice 3 days in a row, the public notices. And he would not let himself decline like that. And Pablo Casals, the great cellist, was practicing into his 90s because he said, I think I'm still improving. So if somebody with that sort of tremendous capability and
Right.
ability and accolades is still focused on growing, that sets the bar and a standard for us. It's like, okay, I can do a little bit more today and a little more in every day in different ways. Eventually you're doing something audacious.
Yes, you certainly are. I'm reminded as you're talking about this, the growth, the piece that sometimes people struggle with is the incremental smaller steps, right? Because they're not seeing it, they're actually, it's there, they don't recognize it, they easily give up. And I think of that, the scene from the Karate Kid, right? The whole wax on, wax off, and he's thinking all he's doing is painting fences, but he's actually learning a technique. And so the piece around those small incremental steps, they do very much matter, don't they, Joe?
Absolutely. And we don't see it in ourselves. Other people see it first. So if you're trying to lose weight and you're doing the right things, eating healthier, getting your exercise and all that, other people are going to notice it before you notice it. In fact, it's going to get hard for you because you're going to get sore from working out. You're going to be cranky because you're hangry. You're going to have these things that you're dealing with, but you don't see it and other people can. And so having the right people around you that can give you feedback and reinforcement is critical to doing anything tremendous that you want to do.
Right. No, absolutely. You have to have that circle, that support almost in a sense, right? Because you are going to have, there's going to be hills and valleys, Joe. We know this, right?
Yeah.
And the hills might be really low or they may not be a little, not so low. But nonetheless, we still need that support as we go through it because life isn't up and down. It just naturally
the bigger the mountain that you're trying to climb, the more downs that you have along the way, the more difficult it's going to be.
Great point.
And so you need that reinforcement internally and externally to be able to keep moving forward.
Great point. Give me your definition of what excellence is, Joe.
Excellence is an attitude. It is professional pride in all things that you do and a belief that I can be better. And adopting that and living it out, so it's an active philosophy, is what excellence is. The Greek actually have a really good term for it, arete, which is the physical and mental and spiritual unification of betterment.
Say it again. Give me that word.
Arete. I think it's Arete.
Oh.
Okay. And so it is. In the martial arts, we talk about mind, body, and spirit. The Greeks embodied the same thing, where it was your physical, your mental, and your emotional / spiritual all growing in harmony.
And I asked about the definition of excellence, and thank you, because I asked about that because to me, at times I sense that it's very personal. Right, how I define excellence, very much similar to satisfaction, and what satisfies me may not necessarily be the same for you. But so I sort of view excellence very similar in that sense, but it's still a higher level. It's just a matter of how high you want to go, isn't that?
Exactly. And excellence is comparative. You should be comparing yourself not to somebody else. I see these people are like showing these Instagram models. I'm like, dude, they've been working at that for 10 years and took 1,000 pictures to get that. Compare yourself to where you were previously. Are you better than what you were? And it's that continuously challenging yourself to approach your ideal. We'll never hit it, but to improve towards what you see as the best version of you. That is excellence. So like a little kid learning to walk, you know what? Taking 4 steps, that's excellent. Okay. Usain Bolt being able to shave off another 1/100th of a second and crack another world record, to him, that's excellence.
Right.
I will never look like Usain Bolt in any way, shape, or form, but you know what? I can maybe get a couple of seconds faster on my mile.
Right.
And it's not just, okay, that's what I want. It's what do I need to do? The discipline to get up and train, to stretch, to eat properly, to balance that with what I'm doing with work. That whole mindset of betterment for a purpose and across multiple different areas, that is what excellence truly is. And it's like discipline. It's a cross-dimensional ability that if you're becoming excellent in some areas, you're going to see a bleed over into the other areas of your life naturally.
Right. Yeah, it will naturally spill over, absolutely, and it carries on, and if it's done correctly, it's a very seamless bleed over, because it just seems it's like, this is just how I live my life. I don't know anything differently.
Exactly. So you adapt this mental model of, I'm going to do the hard things. And I love the fact that Ryan Holiday's newest book, Courage is Calling, right in the front, he talks about Hercules' choice. And this is one of my favorite myths. If you're not familiar with it, Hercules, young in his life, demigod, and he's on the road, and he is suddenly presented with two goddesses. There's a fork in the road. One goddess gives him the opportunity for the life of ease. She's dressed in all these wonderful silks. There's food, there's maidens. And she's like, take this path, Hercules. You will live a life of ease as a mortal. You will have no worries, no pain until the end of your days. But at the end of your days, that will be the end. In 2 generations, you will be forgotten. The other goddess is clad in armor, and she offers pain. She offers suffering. She offers labor and the opportunity for greatness. She said, there is risk here. However, if you succeed, you will take your place among the immortals on Mount Olympus. And he chose that path. And throughout our entire lives, in almost every moment, we make 10, 12,000 decisions a day. And every time we make a decision, you can lump the potential direct choices into 2 piles. One pile is easy. Feels good in the moment. However, the easy path generally points your arrow downward. It makes things more difficult over time. You eat the cheeseburgers, and I love cheeseburgers. You eat too many of them, you know what? You're going to have heart problems. Okay. Your pants aren't going to fit. You're not going to be able to do things. You avoid studying for the test to play video games. Oh, that was fun. Got a dopamine hit, but you failed the exam. Okay. You avoid the difficult conversation with your significant other, and it's easy in the moment, but it makes things worse and worse. And then you're in, relationship hell long range. Right. Or you can have the difficult path. You can take the more risky, the harder, the more painful choice. But you know what? Picking up the weights in the morning means that I'm going to have muscle mass when I'm in my 80s. Right. Okay. Avoiding the cheeseburger means that I'm going to still be in calorie deficit. My pants are going to fit. I'm going to be able to achieve these other things. Having the difficult conversation with my boss means that I get the raise. Yep. Having the difficult conversation with my teenage kid means that he's not going to do stupid things or as many stupid things, which means I'm going to knock on the door by the cops or whatever the case may be. So if we look, we constantly have the ability to make either the easy choice or the right choice. And so excellence is reflected in what Jocko Willink talks about. Discipline equals freedom. It is taking the harder choice consistently, because ultimately it gives you the better outcomes.
How important is the why to all this, and knowing why we do what we do? I would imagine they would fuel our choices, and then in some instances they could perhaps even make our choices even easier, couldn't they?
Why is the most important of the questions possible, actually. As Friedrich Nietzsche said, he who has a strong enough why can overcome any how. Or Walt Disney said, when values are clear, decisions are easy. So if your why is important enough, we're special needs parents. Our why is our kid. Okay. I don't want to get up this morning. Oh, but I got to take care of stuff to take care of my kid. I'm going to do it. Okay.
Right.
That is a graphic example. And so that special needs parent could be like us with autistic children. I've got a friend who's got a kid with pediatric cancer. It could be, the parent of the diabetic. It could be you've got an aging parent that you need to take care of at this point.
Yeah.
If your why is big enough, you will overcome whatever how. Simon Sinek talks about this. So this is the reason why people go into the military and serve their country. This is the reason why people work 3 jobs to take care of their kids, or they study to get that degree at 2:00 in the morning after pulling a 10-hour day. It's because that why is so important. Jordan Peterson talks about justifying your suffering. If your why is big enough, you will overcome these things.
Right.
You will go through this pain because you understand what's on the far side is that important. Glory lies on the far side of pain.
Yes. Oftentimes I oftentimes give the analogy that we're on this path and there's a boulder in our path, and it's our job to either get up, over, around, through, however, because on the other side is where the greatness lies. Right.
And that is Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way. In fact, there was a king 2,000 years ago who put a boulder in the way of his subjects as a way to test them. And an old man, everybody was coming in and they were turning away, and they were giving up the first sign of adversity, probably because they had snowplow parents as opposed to growing up in the 70s like we did. But this old guy comes on up, realizes it, takes a tree branch and uses it as a lever to move it out of the way, and there underneath it was a purse of gold. So if you're willing to do what it takes and overcome the obstacles, you get the reward, whether it's building a startup company, getting that degree, taking the time to train and run the marathon. Right. These are all obstacles in our life that you develop resilience by overcoming, and the reward is there in the end. This is the reason why all the great myths talk about slaying the dragon and getting the hoard of gold. Okay. Right. It's an obstacle. It's a big, scary obstacle, but the bigger and scarier the obstacle, the greater the treasure that you can unlock.
Yeah, and the reward. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, you think at the end and that satisfaction that you have. I even in my personal life, I can think of all these moments where you get to the other side of this thing, and you're just like, and a couple instances where I'm just overwhelmed with emotion because I'm looking at the journey and the path and all I had to endure, and I get there and I'm like, wow, I'm here.
Yeah. And it's awesome, isn't it?
It's amazing.
It's sort of addictive. You're like, okay, what's my next mountain that I'm going to climb? But also it's inspirational. The people around you who understand what that struggle is, who then pat you on the back and give you the huge hug and celebrate with you, you are giving them inspiration. Because I had a friend who's like, I never thought I'd do a marathon until I saw you did one, Joe. I never thought about going into business until I saw what you were able to accomplish and how you helped people and had fun with it. And so there are people who are successful today because I took the time to tutor them or mentor them. But there's some people who are doing incredible things because they're friends of mine or friends of friends, and they heard about some of this stuff. And that's one of the best things that we can be is if we can be a beacon to others of what they potentially can. This is one of the reasons why I mentioned David Goggins, because some of the stuff that he's going through in the past and everything, I'm like, wow, that's awesome. I can do more. And he was doing it with a hole in his heart to top it all off. So what's my excuse?
That's right. And that's the reason why I'm such a big fan of sharing our stories, for that reason, because the inspiration of what we can give to other people without even knowing. I mean, how many times, I'm sure, Joe, it's happened to you where you've inspired someone and had absolutely no idea, had no clue, just because you were living your life, right? And they've taken something from that.
I've had former Cub Scouts come back 8-10 years later and thank me. And it's like, wow, I had some impact on that kid. And you don't realize it in the moment, but these are the sort of stories that you hear about later that come on back. And those are some of the most fulfilling things to me. Having that kid come back and thank me and, tell me about their success is worth more than any medal or trophy that I've ever won.
I get it.
Those things, that is the greatest reward possible, is passing it on and creating a championship ideal and mindset in somebody else.
I love that. I've experienced that same thing as well too. But for me, the one that really gets me excited is that I don't remember what I had done. Like I can't actually pinpoint to go, it was on this day. And what that says to me is I was just naturally being myself, naturally, whether it's being of an aid or support or a listening ear or whatever it is. And the fact that I don't remember and this was life changing for them says, man, I'm on the right path in terms of how I live my life.
Right. But here's the flip side on that. Maybe that one time when we yelled because we were having a bad day and like we popped the tire and we're running late for the meeting and all this, and we're nasty to somebody, those can ripple too.
Yes, they
can.
So
we've all heard about the butterfly effect as to the impact of our actions. So that's one of the reasons why we need to try and minimize that negativity around us, because we never know which kid's watching, we never know who's listening, and we have an obligation to them to be better. And this is one of the things that Stoicism, I started studying it after my son's diagnosis with autism, and I've always been familiar with it, but really getting into it more because if he spills the milk when he was like 4 or 5 years old, right after he was first diagnosed, and I lose it because I'm stressed out from work or whatever, I could literally undo weeks worth of development for him by yelling at him over the milk. Or if you're your assistant, or if I yelled at a student in Taekwondo because I was having a bad day, which I never did yell at them, but I could have done that. Or take it out on somebody in the office. You can literally destroy their career with that negativity. So that's a somewhat awesome responsibility. But this is one of the things about becoming better consistently, is you reduce those negativities. We have the average person somewhere around 40,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day.
Okay.
Wow. And 75% of them are fairly routine. And so one of the things that I talk about, setting up that environment for success to make you happier, to make you better. It's how you're feeding your mind throughout the day. It's how you're using psychosomatic feedback to improve your attitude, improve your decision-making, your emotions, all this sort of stuff. If we realize that it's 4 or 5 choices, Deadpool is told this by Colossus in Deadpool 2, but for them it's 4 or 5 choices to become a hero, and they're the big choices. For us, it's those 4 or 5 micro decisions every single day that determine, is at the end of the day, did we win or lose the day?
Gotcha.
And so how do we make sure that in those 4 or 5 micro decisions, we choose the harder path, the path of excellence, as opposed to the path of convenience?
Got you. I'm a big Marvel fan myself, by the way, so I appreciate the Deadpool reference.
So you see all my Thors up there then. Huh?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm with you. We talked about excellence, and I think it's only right that we get into habits specifically, because it's a series of habits that feed excellence and gets us on that path of excellence, and those continued sustained habits. I want to sort of talk about that, because the way I see it, it's almost like habits are kind of like like a domino, if you will, right? They trickle one to the next, and it leads to all sorts of things.
And I actually use that analogy a lot, because in some ways we want to kick off the dominoes in a positive way in the morning, so that we get the big effect throughout the day. But another thing is, we need to be able to put our hand there and stop the dominoes from falling if it's a negative chain reaction.
Good point.
So that is something to be aware of too. And I'm a big fan of habit stacking that James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits. So we all get up in the morning, right?
Right. We do.
So what do you do in that first hour when you've got the potential to be your most productive? How do you set up a positive chain reaction? I get up, I grab my cup of coffee, and I have a half a cup sitting there. I hit the start button on the coffee pot to brew the rest of it. Okay. So I need to make sure that's set up the night before. Your day begins the day before. Always remember that. Okay. You set yourself up for it. So I have my half cup of coffee and I literally sit down and I'll read The Daily Laws by Robert Greene is one I'm reading this year. Last year it was Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. I read Everyday Excellence myself. I designed it to be one of those things where you spend 1 to 2 minutes every morning, read it, and I dump whatever's in my head because I write a lot. So I write out whatever's in my head. Then I get up and I go work out for 20 minutes.
Right.
And so I do that. Then I sit down and I write again. When I was writing the book, I had to write at least 2 days worth every single morning. And if it sucked, I'd throw out 90% of it, but I still forced myself to write every single day. And then after I get all that out of my head, then I go and do another quick workout for another 20, 30 minutes. Then I can really get about my day, have breakfast, shower, start getting into my other work. But by doing that as my basic habit every single morning, in that first hour, I accomplish more than most writers accomplish in an entire day.
Wow.
Because I make it a habit.
Right.
So that's how we can start habit stacking. And if you've got a habit stack like that, it's easy to add additional things in. It's easy to say, okay, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk. I'm going to spend 5 minutes studying my good book from whichever religion you want to pull from. I'm going to spend, 2 minutes making sure that I make lunch for my kids. So that every single day they have lunch with a note for me saying how much I love them. Okay, I'm going to bring coffee to my significant other and give them a kiss on their forehead so that they wake up with hot coffee right there. Okay, whatever it is, it's easy to add those in. If you're trying to create a habit out of nowhere, that's where the difficulty arises. Oh, I'm going to start running every single day. Well, do you even have running shoes? That might be a decent start. Right? And you create the habit of, okay, the running shoes are sitting next to the bed with my running clothes. So I get out of bed, I literally trip over them. Okay, I guess I'll put them on. So is using the concept of nudge, which is what Thaler got the Nobel Prize in economics for, is setting your environment up so you make the better decisions overall.
Yeah. I remember I had an opportunity to sit down and chat with Jim Cathcart, a renowned speaker, and he was sharing a story with me about how he got into jogging. And he would say he started off by, putting his sneakers on. And he'd walk down to the corner and he'd come back and take them off. And then he'd put them on again and walk another block. And he goes, oh, since I'm walking, I'll start jogging. And next thing you know, he started jogging. He's doing marathons. And so that same kind of thing, building on that. But it started with the creating a habit. And actually, what I thought of this, he said at the very beginning, before he started running, he was just in the habit of putting on his sneakers, and regardless what it was he was doing, like if he was about to go out and do something, no, I gotta put my sneakers on today. He put his sneakers on, walk outside and walk in and back in the house and take them off and go do what he's doing. But that's how he built himself up, through that habit.
Creating a micro habit that then can expand to doing crazy, audacious things.
Right. That's exactly it. So I think there's much to be said about these habits and why it's so important that we should pay attention to the habits that we pick up. Because as much as we, and what we've been talking about here are these positive habits that have, positive outcomes, we also could be doing the same thing with negative habits and potentially negative outcomes as well, too, can't we?
Right. I mean, Warren Buffett said that the chains of habit are light until they are too light to break. Okay. So, it's putting that app on your phone that you shouldn't have, and going places that you shouldn't, whether it's a dating app or, a gambling app or just, something that sucks your time away, doing the crossword puzzle or Wordle is now the big one or what have you. So that's a negative example of it. It's, I'm just going to have one beer after work tonight. Then, that becomes 2 beers, and then it becomes, a 6-pack, because you're not setting up the environment to say, no, not going to do that. And hey, I like my beer. I'm Irish, give me my Guinness, but I'm not going to sit there and have 4 of them. I need to earn my beer. So you can have it as a reward. And so if you create that dichotomy with yourself. As I said, I love donuts. Well, I'm not allowed to have donuts unless I run 5 miles. In fact, I gave them up for Lent, so I'm not having any until after Easter. But it's those little things where you can have rewards and you can set things up so that the chains of habit never become bad for you. So completely avoiding the situation or removing yourself from situations that become bad. Like if you got that one friend who, and always ends up, you drink way too much and you get in trouble and, all right, either don't be around them, which can be tough, or minimize how you're going to interact with them. Okay.
Right.
Make it so that, all right, I'm only going to hang out with them on this particular day. And I'm going to make it so that I can't, go out with them until 2 a.m. I have something the next morning that I'm committed to that I have to be at. So I'm only limited to an hour and a half with them. So I can't get in too much trouble.
Yep. Yeah. I think the key is figuring that out and being very clear and, as the full picture and also a little bit knowing yourself too, right, Joe? Like in terms of, what areas you perform best in and really knowing, maybe these areas that I struggle with. So stay away from it altogether, right? And so really
there's no junk food in my house for a reason. Okay. Because I would eat it. And so, the simplest way to not eat is to not have it. This is why my one friend who just got out of rehab, we took all the alcohol out of the house.
Right.
And we took anything that had reference to beer because he had like some cool beer signs, stuff like that. Nope. Loses all of those. Okay. And we also completely rearranged the house because this is one of the things that I've seen with people with PTSD. I was talking with one of my friends who's special forces about this, is that people will get into this habit. So they'll sit in the same chair looking at the same environment and have the same negative thoughts. Well, if we can change the environment around that, we can make a better environment. So that chair that you sit in, you have these negative suicidal thoughts. We took the chair and we burned it. Okay. So now he's got a new chair. Guess what?
New thoughts.
Not as many bad thoughts.
Right.
When I'm coaching people in business and I give them concepts and ideas on how to improve their business, all that, the next thing I make them do is I make them change around their office. So you're getting a different visual reinforcement. So I don't care if they just face their desk 90 degrees different and rearrange the things hanging on the wall. They're getting a different message than what they were getting previously, so they can have different outcomes.
Makes sense. It totally makes sense. Joe, it'd be remiss if we didn't touch specifically on your book. I know we sort of generally reference it, but Everyday Excellence was a book that you wrote as a daily guide to growing. There we go. And I really appreciate the manner in which you've laid it out because it's sort of a quick little, whether it be a quote or an idea or a thought, provide with a little bit of an action plan. But I also like the way you provide an opportunity to sort of make notes and give suggestions of what can be done to support, the idea of getting better for that particular day. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So a lot of the daily readers that I've seen, whether it's like the Daily Shakespeare or these things from other people, they'll have a concept, they'll have a quote maybe, and maybe some discussion, but that's it. And one of the things that the Stoics always talked about is not being a pen and ink philosopher, actually living things out. And so actions are what is important. As I say, words are weak, actions speak. And so having an action item every single day, even if it's something as simple as smiling at 5 people today, because when you smile, it biochemically changes you.
Right.
It reduces the cortisol in your system, increases your serotonin, you're happier. It literally changes the blood flow. If you looked at an EEG of somebody before smiling and after smiling, you can see some difference. If you smile, you're actually slightly more intelligent, you're slightly more creative. So these are all good things. Right. And when you smile at somebody else, it activates the mirror neurons. So you're smiling, I have to smile back at you. That's okay. Right. And so My life is now better. I'm slightly smarter now because you smiled at me. That's a beautiful gift.
I love it.
Okay. So we share this sort of stuff. And an action item like that, we don't know again how it's going to ripple throughout the universe.
Yes.
Okay. Other action items are a little bit more difficult, like sitting down and doing a SWOT analysis at the beginning of the year so you know what to work on,
Yep.
or taking and writing down all the reasons why you're angry with somebody. And
Right.
then literally saying, I forgive you for this, and crossing it off. I forgive you for this, and crossing it off.
Right.
Going through like that, or writing a letter to the person that you're really angry with, laying it all out, and then burning the letter.
Right.
Those sort of things can take a lot of there's like a big moment in terms of doing it, but you get through it, and greatness lies on the other side of the pain. You are better for it. Even if you haven't had the physical conversation with that person, you've taken a step towards that direction. You are doing the hard things, and hard things lead to good things.
Yep. I do that with emails sometimes. I'll write that email and never send it, but I just write it and get it out. And then
Abraham Lincoln did this.
Yeah.
He'd write letters, and, he'd burn them, or they'd find him after he was assassinated, never sent. And it allowed him to clarify his thinking, but also get it off his chest. And so he could forgive. And so these are the sort of things that we have people do, so like, I'm just opening the book, here's an action item. Was a non-fatal risk you could take on a personal basis. Do it. Action item is one small thing that you're afraid to do that could have great positive results. Do it. Action item: pretend you have no internet, can't shop, and there is no social media. You can't talk to other people. What are you going to do today to be happy?
Right. Yep.
Action item: smile at 10 people today. That's always one of my friends. Action item: focus on making yourself and others laugh today. The more, the better. Action item: what sustains you more than food? What makes you rise early and work late? Do more of it.
Yep. It's really pushing people to the things that gives them that joy and that happiness and that satisfaction.
Or minimizes their negative attitudes or habits. And again, it's micro decisions. It's micro choices. That's why I call it human Kaizen, because if you can do something a little bit better today, and then the next day you do something else a little bit better, and then the next day you do something that you're not so good at, you do it a little less poorly, or you do eliminate a little bit of negativity. By consistently working on these things every day, improving in some capacity, at the end of 3 months, you look back and you're like, wow, I didn't realize that I could be that. And then at the end of the year, you're like, wow, this is a tremendous change. And that's why the book's written the way that it is because guess what? Next year's a new year. You can just go back through the book, and you're looking at it each day with new eyes. And you can make slightly different decisions as to the action items and the applications of it. And you can continuously improve over an extended period. And if you can get just 1% better per week, but you consistently do it, how great are you going to be after 3 or 4 years? This is the whole idea behind ranking up in martial arts.
That's it. Going back to the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, right? A little bit at a time, you'll get there. Joe, this has been really, really awesome, and I really appreciate you taking time and chatting like this. I think your insights are bang on, something I support wholeheartedly. And in terms of sort of the framework of this audacious brand that we have, I think it fits in very, very nicely, and it makes total sense for your beer. So I'm glad we had the chance to chat. For our listeners who want to learn more about you or grab their own copy of Everyday Excellence, where can we send them? Where's the best place to go?
They can always go to all the normal bookstores online or physically, or they can go to my website, which is everyday-excellence.com. I put up a microblog 5 different days a week, so there's always continuous new information up there. This podcast will actually live there, so people can always find it easily. Or they can follow me on Twitter or Facebook, which is at EDE with Joe. So at EDE for Everyday Excellence, with
Right.
Joe. So that way I'm out there in lots of different areas and they can find and take what is appropriate for them on their personal journey to doing something really audacious.
I love it. I love it. I love that. And I love the idea of taking something personal for them, because we're clearly saying is not one size fits all, right? We're all on our own individual path, individual journey. The things that you'll need in your toolkit will be very different than what I may need, but we're still forging towards something. And so that's a great point to end on. Joe, thank you for this. It's been really awesome. Appreciate you being here on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Audley, thank you. Be excellent and grow today.
Back we are here on the podcast, and I want to thank Joe for hanging out with me here and sharing some great insights and how we build that life of excellence. I'll also remind you that you can pick up a copy of his book, Everyday Excellence, for the best daily lessons on living your best, audacious, excellent life ever. So absolutely fabulous. Again, it was just cool to chat with Joe about that process of building and living a life of excellence, because it really is a deliberate process that takes work, but it has to happen on a daily basis to be effective. So again, Joe, thank you so much for doing this. It was absolutely awesome. When I reflect on my conversation with Joe, he really left us with a lot of great points and things to remember. But if there's just one thing that I would take from my conversation with him, it would be this. The pursuit of a life of excellence begins with a conscious decision to make changes to our character, as well as the way we behave, act, and live our lives. It's a series of positive habits strung together that are reflected in our daily living and eventually form how we come to be, the thing that people know us for. Now I need to be clear, because it's far easier said than done, because establishing and building and maintaining good habits can be difficult. The key is to start small, develop habits that are easy to do, so that way you can't say no to them. If the end goal is to walk 30 minutes a day, start off by walking like 5 and gradually build up over time. If you want to write a book, commit to scribbling down a few sentences a day. What you'll find that as you maintain that habit, you're able to slowly and gradually increase the intensity and frequency over time until you reach your audacious, excellent goal. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you got to do is enter your email address, and you'll be connected immediately and be in the loop every time we got brand new content that comes out. We've reached the end of another episode of the podcast, and as always, I want to send out a big shout out to our audacious listeners of very much support and appreciate your support. It's been awesome. Thank you, and we'll keep doing our thing. Thank you again. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.